Good morning, Elaine.
Good morning. I'm really sorry I'm late.
Sorry. Roads are probably a little messy out there, huh?
Yeah, we'll go into it later, off the air. Sorry about that.
Well, we shouldn't be having weather like this in April. It's spring, but that's a whole nother conversation. Elaine, while we were waiting for you to get set up, we started talking about the organization. So why don't you give our listeners an overview of the New Hampshire Firearms Safety Coalition?
Okay. So the New Hampshire Firearms Safety Coalition has been around actually for quite a long time. We started in 1994 in response to some data that we learned about a rise in youth violent deaths, primarily firearms and primarily suicides. And we looked at what was currently being done at that time, and it turned out, when I looked at stuff, that the things that were coming out on the pro-gun side and the things that were coming out on the gun control side, with regard to firearm safety, we're saying exactly the same stuff. And I thought, wouldn't it make more sense for us to work together and learn from each other and put out some materials that made sense to both sides? So that's what we did, and we've worked on a number of projects over the years, none of which I have to say were legislative. And we've continued to agree to disagree on the use of firearms, but really focus on preventing the misuse.
I like that message. I'm a very pro, there's no secrets. Anybody who listens here, I'm very pro Second Amendment. But at the same time, I'm pro. I'm also very pro safe handling. And I am also concerned about the community. This is an issue. We mentioned, I was talking to John, I've had a number of guests on about suicide in my listening area. The numbers are stark. We've had a number. We don't report suicides here at WNTK as a matter of policy.
Excellent.
But in the last 6 months, the numbers are bad. It's a bad number. I will throw a rough number. It's been about 6. That's a lot in 6 months. And then I had West Central Behavioral Health on. They told me that suicide is now the #1 killer of young men in the state of New Hampshire. By the way, we should say non-accidental. So car accidents.
No,
things like
absolutely. That's exactly true.
That number is stark. And while there's a number of reasons why, and that's on a whole different psychological level, anytime that we can take, the fact is, firearms are the #1 thing that people use when they take their lives. Statistics don't lie on that one.
Absolutely.
It is what it is. So anytime we can get a group of people to come together and say, hey, let's talk about the safety component. Now, John, one of the questions I have, I know with myself that I tend to be a bit skeptical when somebody comes to me and they use the word gun safety. What was your initial reaction when it came to you and said, hey, we have this initiative?
Well, the perfect part about this is that they didn't come to me. I heard about them. I heard them on New Hampshire Public Radio. I apologize for not remembering which show. It was, the 8 o'clock drive home rerun show. And I heard about it. I listen to NHPR a lot. Righties might not like that, but we all listen to both sides, and we should. Everybody's got a good point here and there.
We're all paying for it. We should listen to it.
We should. But I liked what I heard. I wasn't offended by the message at all. And like yourself, I'm a little far right and very pro Second Amendment. So I sought them out and fired off some emails, and I was contacted by Elaine with some information and a plug to Ralph. When I heard that Ralph was involved in it, I was, very comforted by that. Obviously, it wasn't something that he would get involved in lightly if he thought it was way too far left or anti. So I got the impression right off the bat that it was middle of the road, message-oriented, and not anti or pro anything.
Yeah, and you're speaking, when he says Ralph, he's talking about Skip's gun shop over in the Alexandria area. Right. Skip Riley is a guest on the show from time to time. Ironically, when I have him on, it's usually about wind issues. That's the funny part about that. But with that being said, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Elaine, I want to start talking about some of the about the group itself and some of how the initiatives work and the reception from the firearms community.
Great.
Sounds good. It's 7:21 on WNTK. WNTK News Time, 7:24. In the studio, I have Elaine Frank and John Ewell. They're from the New Hampshire Firearms Safety Coalition. We're talking about is people getting together, not necessarily people that always agree on everything, but people getting together on a cause and saying, we can help, we can be effective. And that cause in this case is preventing suicides. And Elaine, as we went out, we were talking about, the gun shops. John has a sports shop, and he's one of the people that puts up some of your information about the suicide prevention. We'll talk specifically about the marketing material in just a minute. But what I wanted to ask was, what's the reception like? How many gun shops have signed on in New Hampshire?
Well, when we sent out a packet of materials, as you said, and then actually starting about 4 to 6 months later, we started visiting the gun shops to actually see with our own eyes whether any of the materials were being used. We figured that was a good way to measure reception. And we were really pleased to see that almost half, about 48% of the shops, were using at least one of the materials. After one mailing, we think that's pretty good response rate. The other thing that I was really excited about, and we were talking about this during the break, is that I personally went to quite a few of the shops, about over 20. And the other piece that I found was interesting was that a number of the gun shop dealers told me that they'd been talking to their peers, to other gun shops, talking about the project. Some saying, what do you think about this? But mostly saying, this is a no-brainer.
Yeah.
We ought to be doing this. If we're doing anything, we ought to be keeping people from taking their own lives in general,
right? And
particularly with guns, because that's our thing. That's what we do. And so, I would say overall the reception's been good. Obviously, it needs to keep growing. I think when you look at this, I look at it almost as trying to, we talk at the meetings about the changes in designated drivers and the reduction in drinking while driving. We all know there was a time where people did that.
It was accepted.
It was socially acceptable.
Yeah, it was acceptable.
There were lots of jokes about it. Everybody would talk about how
police would follow you home.
Exactly.
Make sure you got home okay.
That's exactly right. And now, I'm not saying it never happens, but it's not considered okay. And as a result of that, the number of people getting killed in drunk driving crashes has gone down dramatically, saving thousands and thousands of lives. We're really saying, let's do the same thing about firearms and suicide. We're not trying to eliminate firearms. We're not trying to eliminate people having guns. We're just trying to keep people who shouldn't have guns because they're depressed and at risk
it's
from
the
having
message.
access.
You just want the message out there. It's a preventative message, and it's one that I think everybody can agree on. So real quick, I got about 2 minutes. Can one of you talk about, I guess, Elaine, this is more of a question for you. Can you talk about the material itself? When you have the material, what is it?
Okay, so the packet included, I think the most important, the front cover letter of why we're doing it. The most important piece is what we call the tip sheet, and it's a thing to retailers saying, what are signs that someone could be suicidal? What can you do about it? What are options for how you respond to a buyer who might be suicidal? And then what else you can do. So that's for in the shop. And then the educational materials for customers include a poster that is, I'll leave you one, that basically just says if you're concerned about someone, hold on to their guns. And I might add, we should add someone who's homicidal to someone who's suicidal, because we don't want that either.
That was Dickie Crate. He's with the New Hampshire Chiefs of Police Association, and he's the Enfield Police Chief. Right. That's his big thing. See something, say something. It applies to more than just terrorism.
Yes, it
I
does.
like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
Then he was on the show and said that, and I thought it was a really good message.
We'll have to add that to our lines. And then there are brochures. We've taken the usual 10 rules of firearm safety, or the 10 commandments, and we've added an 11th, which basically says the same thing. If you're worried about someone, if you're concerned, hold on to their guns. The line we use is, if you put some time and distance between a suicidal person and a gun, you may save their lives.
Give them some time to think about it. John, I got about 20 seconds. If people coming in your shop, has anybody mentioned it? Has anybody said, hey, I see this material?
They pick the material up. They read the material.
Nice.
We will never know, probably, if it's worked, other than the fact that, hopefully we see a decline in the statistics. It's hard to prove a negative, but they pick up the material, they read it. It sits on a counter, and it disappears, so someone's taking it. So that can only be a good thing.
It's all good, guys. I want to thank you for coming on. I'm sorry I got cut short. I will have you back on again, Elaine, and we'll talk more about this in the future.
That sounds great. Be happy to come.
It's 7:30, News, Sports, and Weather up next on WNTK.